Welcome to the Animal Wellness Podcast, all about improving the lives of animals with better policies and practices in government and business. Brought to you by Animal Wellness Action, where we believe helping animals helps us all. Here's your host, Joseph Grove.
Welcome to the Animal Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Grove. Today we are talking with Paul Bochner, an award-winning filmmaker and the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship in Painting. He has written for The Atlantic and The New Yorker and now has published a book called Penelope, The World of Each Other, an account of his relationship over several years with a disabled deer. It is a story about devotion, vulnerability, abandonment, trust, and the profound ways a wild animal can change a human life and allow that human to change hers. The book explores themes of love, trust, abandonment, survival, and the transcendent connection between humans and animals. Through his relationship with Penelope, Paul reflects on the fragility of life, the power of nurturing, and the profound impact of crossing boundaries between species. Also joining us is Wayne Pacelle, president of Animal Wellness Action and the Center for a Humane Economy. He wrote a powerful reflection on Paul's book, which you can read on those websites. He challenges us to ask, do wild animals in our backyards deserve our mercy? And if the answer is yes, what does real mercy require of us? This is a conversation about ethics, love, kinship, and what it means to share a world with other beings, and we're so glad you're with us. So Wayne and Paul, welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Great to be with Paul and you, Joseph. Thank you.
Paul, let's start with you. Your book begins with a single act of mercy, a wounded fawn left for dead. Can you take us back to that first encounter with Penelope, and what made you stop and intervene when most people, frankly, would probably just walk away?
I had been living in the midst of deer for quite many years. I had never had occasion to know one as an individual. Penelope's family, unbeknownst to me that they were hers, mother and two siblings, were more or less living on the property for several months. She came to the door one night, and it's rather mystifying still to me that I got up from my reading and I went to the window. I looked outside. She was almost invisible in the dark, but it was as though I knew she were there, as though she were waiting for me. And so I simply went out, and she had no apprehension at all about letting me come right up to her. And that in itself is extraordinary, because I'm sure you know deer are very wary of humans. They're not predators, they're prey, so their whole instinct is flight. And yet she stood there. I went inside, I got some apples, I came out, and I fed her, not by hand at that point. I put the food on the ground, but she was starving, almost literally. She was emaciated, very small for her age, which I knew to be 8 or 9 months. And I spoke to her. And, we do talk to animals. Anyone who has a dog or a cat knows they can be good conversationalists. But there was a connection that was clear. She understood something from my tone, my intention, perhaps the way I was looking at her. And so it began.
Yeah, and this was back in 2014. The relationship endured for many years, as your book describes. Walk folks through the evolution of that relationship.
From that night, she came to the house the next morning and began to come every day. And indeed, I had asked her to do that. I had said to her in simple English, if you come here, I will care for you. And I can't say that she didn't understand that. She seemed on some level to understand it quite clearly. And I began feeding her every day. And there was a connection on many levels, I think. And deer are mysterious creatures. Even after all these years, I'm surprised by the depth of their emotional life. And we had formed a bond, simple as that. She was in need of love, nurturance, protection, and I was there to provide it without any question. I had no hesitation about entering into this.
Mm-hmm. Wayne writes that Penelope is responding to your book, of course, that you show her, Penelope, as a person with her own personality, particular memories, and moral claims to a decent life. When did you begin to see that Penelope wasn't just a deer, but a someone?
I was probably more than predisposed to that. I have felt a oneness with animal life probably since I was a very young child. I've never been invested in making a distinction between humans and other life. I don't see it. I don't feel it. I have great respect for animals. I respect some animals much more than I respect some people. And it wasn't an evolution. It was there. She showed herself to be a strong individual, and she had survived through an astonishingly brutal winter by herself. Her mother had abandoned her when she became disabled. I don't know how she survived without nursing. There was almost nothing to eat. So that when she came to me, I could feel and see what it was she needed. And what a privilege it felt to me to be able to provide that.
Right. Wayne, you've never reviewed a book, at least in the several years I've been with you. What prompted you to do your first review on this book?
Well, never reviewed a book during my time with Animal Wellness Action in the Center, but I've been keenly interested in the literature on animals and people, and I've written about these topics extensively in my books. But I was really struck by this book, and Bob Mrazek, former congressman, who is one of the founders of Compass Rose Publishing, told me about Paul and told me about the book and said, "Wayne, you've got to read this." And of course, when Congressman Mrazek speaks, I listen. He himself is a great animal advocate. He's a fabulous author of fiction and nonfiction books, and I really trust his instincts, and I know he's deeply caring about animals. And when I got into Paul's book, I just, I recognized that it was much more than a rescue story. There's a great literature on rescuing animals. And for all those people who have undertaken animal rescues, I salute them. Those are my people. Those are people who have a similar moral instinct as I do. But Paul's book really was, more than that. It really became kind of a love story, a platonic love story between him and Penelope. And love is a great part of the human spirit. And love goes a long way in this world. Family love, filial love, so many forms of love exist. You don't see it that much. We do have a companion animal literature on love between people and their pets. My old boss, Cleveland Amory, wrote a book called The Cat Who Came for Christmas, and he wrote other books about him and his cat. There's a tremendous literature on dogs and people, but not as much on wildlife. And deer are much maligned, especially in the part of the world where Paul and I live, right? The Eastern Corridor, where we don't have mountain lions and wolves, and deer are said to be overpopulated. They're said to be a nuisance. They graze on ornamental shrubbery, and people don't like that. And there's a whole sort of hunting world that treats these animals as just a resource, and talk about harvesting them, really denying the individuality of the animals. And what Paul did is he just drew out the personalities. And it wasn't just Penelope, who is the injured fawn. He defended, fed, saved, but her mother, who, exhibited really non-maternal instincts as we understand maternal instincts, as well as the rest of the community of deer. And I was really drawn to the fact that, he was not polemical about the larger set of animal issues. He was really talking about these individuals, as Joseph, as you said, as someone, a bunch of someones. And he, just had great mercy and compassion for them. And his book then moved into kind of an ethnography about this community, which, I've done a lot of reading in anthropology, and I felt like he was a bit of a dear anthropologist at some level.
Paul, as you worked with Penelope, you found, I think, a personal resonance with some of the elements of her story. How did you connect with Penelope's experience and find it to be in some ways a shared one?
Things which I didn't particularly think much about or dwell on, I found coming to the surface as I got to know her. She had a very distinct concept and spectrum of trust, which she tested in me day by day, so precisely and so incrementally. And I realized that this testing of trust was going on, and I committed myself to honor it. It was a great opportunity to honor trust, as it is with another person. But I realized that in my own life, in my own childhood, I had learned to be wary and learned to trust very cautiously. And so she and I both contained this, just to say that she had been rejected and abandoned by her mother because she had become disabled when very, very young, just a few weeks old. And the relationship between a fawn and its mother is profound. It can be lifelong, but certainly when they're young, the fawn follows the mother religiously. They are bound. And for a fawn to be rejected because of a physical injury, her left front foot was broken. And so she walked basically on her wrist. She walked like a person with one leg shorter than the other. And she came to me clearly wanting and needing that trust, but she did not give it without my having earned it. And the process of earning it was extraordinary. I could tell day by day when she felt ready to move forward incrementally. And the day came at the 4-month mark that she became ready to eat from my hand. And I could tell that she was moving toward it, that she wanted it, but that she had to be absolutely sure that if she trusted me, I would not betray that trust. And the trust wasn't physical because I could have reached out to touch her at any point. The trust was emotional. If I invest myself in you, if I allow you to touch me, if I open myself, will you do to me what my mother did? And so I was very conscious of that. And earning that trust from her was one of the most extraordinary moments, because when I knew that it had happened, it felt like falling in love with a woman. I mean, it was just ecstatic that I had passed that test across.
Well, Joseph, I want to just dive in here. And, Paul, you were not doing science work here. You were doing, just human work. You were just being compassionate and caring, and you didn't know where this was going to lead. But it makes me think of Jane Goodall, right? She just passed away after this extraordinary life. And in the 1960s, when she went to Gombe Stream in Tanzania and began to study chimps, and she named them and talked about that community, she was pilloried by the scientific community, right? The animal behaviorists out there said, "Oh, you shouldn't be doing this, and this is not science. This is something different." And, I really admire your courage in writing this book, because you're challenging without, perhaps even thinking in this way, you're challenging so many orthodoxies. Deer are not viewed as one of the really smart animals. They're not viewed as very emotional, right? You don't look at their face and see a lot of different expressions of emotion like you do, say, with a primate, with a human or a chimpanzee or a monkey. And this to me was, just important to just break down these barriers. When I was in college, I remember being in an evolutionary, biology class, and all animal behaviors were described as, having some evolutionary underpinning, right? That it's about, the quest to mate or the quest to survive. Everything's explained, right? Now, you had Castle, her Penelope's mother, right? Am I getting the name correct from her memory?
I named her with the white markings on her feet, which looked like a crenellated tower in a castle.
Yes. So Castle, her mother, basically didn't just abandon her. I mean, Castle wanted to hurt Penelope. And you attempted to explain this at some level or offer some theories on this in the book. And that does, I want to embrace the idea that yes, there are evolutionary underpinnings for animal behavior, our own and other animals. But there's a lot more going on, right? There's a lot more going on in terms of emotion. What about the mother's maternal bond, right? So, okay, maybe she didn't want to have a weak animal around who would be a draw for coyotes to put her other fawns at risk and to put herself at risk. But isn't there a competing bond, which is you're with your baby no matter what? This is how a human mother can lift the back end of a car if the baby's, underneath the vehicle, right? There are super human performances in order to protect your offspring. And I love the book for so many reasons, but I love the idea that you were just wrestling with these issues and that we saw this tension between emotions and feelings and individual expressions of caring and altruism with these more evolutionary kind of reductionist sorts of ideas that, animals are in a struggle for survival, right? And all of that tension to me was a really good part of the book. And I also just say, it's ridiculous to think of animals just in evolutionary terms. They have feelings, they have desires, they have wants, they have love. And you eventually, won Penelope's trust and you had this expression of love between the two of you. You got a lot out of it. She got a lot out of it. And that's what love is.
Well, but there is another parallel to human life in it, which you are absolutely right that the maternal instinct and the maternal child bond is very strong, but not without exception. And we know this in human life. There are mothers who, for whatever reason, do not bond with their children or who bond in a way that contains some pathology. And Penelope's mother didn't simply reject her. She sustained enormous hostility toward her and would chase her viciously. And Penelope was disabled, could not walk very well, and suddenly was forced to run from terrible fear. And this did bring up some things in me that I understood more than I would like to understand them. So the maternal instinct may have a range in animals. Clearly it does, just as it does in people. And that's another way that we are all part of, this big animal life on Earth.
Right. Well, no, I think you're right. And that's a great point. Thank you for building on my comments, because it's not just, we're not just programmed, right? That every mother doesn't automatically love her child, her offspring, her fawn, her cub the same. Just like, we don't respond to all these situations the same as individuals because we're individuals and we're just a blend of everything, right? Internal instinctual impulses, but all of the environmental elements of this. And I guess, I was thinking, you were really you had a very special, unique relationship with Penelope, but you also were understanding you were pissed off about Castle. But you also fed Castle, right? And you also were caring about her and you kind of understood something was going on, but you weren't just diminishing her. You're going to defend Penelope from Castle, but you weren't prepared to throw Castle off the boat, if you will.
No, that's right. And, I came to observe that Penelope's family probably had a deep ancestral connection to this piece of land. They give birth in the same spot every spring. And when I say same spot, it's as if, maybe 3 feet by 4. The deer come back to give birth. So for all I know, that spot has been in their family. It has been their birthing place for centuries, maybe millennia. I don't know. So I respect the right of all animals to live here. And I exult in how many animals do live here. But I wasn't going to in any way back down and allow an innocent life to be brutalized. That's just my instinct. That's, you want to call that my maternal instinct. I recognize that I have it for many, and I definitely had it for her. And Castle understood it to the extent that she would pretend to be neutral or benign while I was watching. And the moment my back was turned, her brutality would rise to the surface against Penelope.
Did you explain that in your mind? Did you think, well, she's just protecting her fawns? Is that what was going on and why she took this approach?
No, I don't think that she was protecting her other fawns. I think she just had a brutal rejection and antipathy of her disabled fawn, who was not perfect. And I can't say that I've seen it elsewhere, and I have gotten to know other deer from the same mother. And so I have been able to gauge the psychological damage to Penelope from rejection that the others did not have. Through the course of our relationship, I had to be very careful never to make Penelope feel that I was abandoning her. I went to great lengths to be there as and when she needed me to honor our commitment. The other deer that have had the same mother, they don't have an issue with that. I may have taken care of them over the years, fed them from my hand. But if I had to go away for 4, 5, 6 days, I'd come back and it was fine. If I had to go away during my time with Penelope, she became very hurt by my absence and angry at me.
Yeah, she bit you. She bit you at one
Yes,
point.
She bit me hard because I'd been away for 3 days. And I knew that during those 3 days, she had come to the door regularly every morning and every evening and waited and waited and waited and had to realize I wasn't there and had to walk away and come back and wait and walk away. And, if you think about a person who is relying on someone to be there for them, it can inflict a wound that can be quite profound. So she let me know several times that she was angry at me. And we finally reached a point where she understood that if I was away for 1 or 2 days, I would come back. But that took a long time.
Joseph and I work in the field of trying to manage aberrant behavior, right? I mean, I don't think that dog fighting and cockfighting and animal cruelty and a lot of the things that we focus on are normal behaviors, right? These are human beings who have lost their empathy and who are misusing their power and hurting living beings, vulnerable living beings. So I think about this a lot. I think about, what are the set of experiences that cause people to behave in these ways? And we know from all the people we know in our lives, even people who are highly functioning, right? And who are staying within the bounds of civil society, we all have our wounds, right? A lot of it is parenting. And what about all the other social circumstances, the influence of friends and others? So, I think that as I was reading your book, I was really just thinking about the complexities, right? The complexities that we often reserve to people. And we have rules in society, right? That's why we have laws. We have a penal system, a justice system. And we do our best. We have a lot of counseling. It's okay to get counseling these days, right? It wasn't always the case. And we just forget about all this with the animals. We don't think about the animals on the factory farms, the pigs who are trapped in a crate for years on end. mean, what kind of trauma are they enduring? And the wild animals who are, chased down by the guys with packs of dogs and chase a bear and shoot the bear out of a tree, or, I could go on and on. I've been working with a member of ours about trying to get some geriatric elephants out of traveling circuses. What are these 56 or 58-year-old elephants doing traveling around in the circus and, going to perform in Michigan in January in 15-degree cold weather in a tent? I mean, this is the world that we are trying to unpack. And I always say that one of the essentials of a successful social movement is to have its artists, to have its writers, to have people who are using their creative talents to illuminate these issues and make us think, to break out of this mental straitjacket that we're in when it comes to our understanding of animals. And that's, one great reason why I think you've written certainly a very tender book, Paul, but you've written a courageous book because you're probing the psychology of other animals, and you're understanding that there's a lot going on there that we are just witless about in so many ways.
That so many of the things you've just mentioned in your last few minutes of speaking have been very emotionally powerful elements of my life. Almost nothing, maybe nothing, has been more painful to me than the thought of human cruelty to animals. And we all witness it. We all participate in it in unwitting ways. I'll just tell you an experience that I had quite a few years ago. I was driving south, probably through Maryland, Virginia. I don't remember exactly where there was a lot of factory farming going on, and a truck pulled up parallel to me on my left, and it was one of those sort of farm trucks. It had an open bed that was piled with wooden crates that had been jammed with living chickens. They had been packed into those crates so tightly, and I knew that they were going from the factory farm where they had been born, where they had been in darkness all their lives. They were going to be slaughtered. But there was one chicken that I saw who was looking out of this crate, seeing the sky for the first time, seeing the earth. It affected me so profoundly. I've never forgotten it and never will. And I don't eat chicken, but believe me, couldn't possibly do it.
You're listening to the Animal Wellness Podcast. We'll be right back after this quick word from our sponsor.
Animal Wellness Action depends on countless people like you to support our fight for animals. Join us today by donating to further our campaigns to spare countless animals from cruel and needless pharmaceutical tests. Put an end to animal fighting. Liberate farm animals from extreme confinement and so many others. Become a donor at any amount. Visit animalwellnessaction.org/donate to join our fight against animal cruelty of all kinds. Again, that's animalwellnessaction.org/donate. Thank you.
Now, back to the Animal Wellness Podcast.
Part of your rumination in the book, Paul, is about the difference between animals and humans, whether there is one, how much of one, if so. Where did your thinking start and where did it end over the course of this multi-year experience?
Well, I can tell you definitely that it hasn't ended. I was enlarged, enriched by being trusted by a wild deer, by forming a bond of real love. And I can't say that it started, because I think that all life is simply a continuation of our experience, and this was one part of it that came to me, and I could not have gone in search of this relationship. I couldn't have made it happen. She came to me, and I believe actually now that she was guiding the whole thing. She was seeing if she could induce the human being to give her what she needed on so many levels. not simply food, but a sense of belonging in the world, a sense of safety, to give her love, which she had been deprived of.
It's interesting, too, when you think about how her detachment, forced from her mother, perhaps made her more open to a bond with you. I think we see often, I'll ask you to comment, the same thing with people, right? That it's often the people who are the most broken, isolated, exiled from family or friends or love that are more able to form bonds with other animals, perhaps relate better to children. Do you think that's an accurate statement borne out by what you saw and what you felt?
I think that there are elements of that that were definitely present. In dealing with her and providing for her, in earning her trust, in celebrating the love that came between us, I did think about aspects of my own life, but I think that I agree with you that sometimes the most loving people are the people who have had to struggle to learn what love is, to find it in the world. I know that. And I watched as at the age of 2, Penelope gave birth to her own fawn and was an immaculately caring, loving mother. Extraordinary to me that she had not received any of this, but it was in her, and that I could enable this motherhood in her, that I partnered her in raising her first fawn. And 1 year later, for me, probably the most telling moment in my relationship with her, she was 3 years old and she gave birth to twins one morning. And I knew she was carrying twins because I had felt them through her body, felt them in the womb. And they were born at about 5 o'clock in the morning. And 20 minutes later, she came to me leading one of them, this half-hour-old female fawn, to me, and left this fawn with me for the first 4 hours of her life while she went back to attend to the other twin. She trusted me to an extent that I can't even express. She knew that I would honor what she needed me to do, that I would understand the fragility of this fawn. And indeed, we spent 4 hours together and we formed this wonderful bond. And 4 hours later, Penelope came back to nurse her in this fawn, Iris. But to me, that was the ultimate test of trust.
Is anything asked of the male mate by the female in nature?
No, the males, the bucks and the stags, they do not stick around. They come during mating season, which is right now, October, November, and they will impregnate as many females as they can in that time, and then they go away. And usually they live together. They don't live as a family, which is where we get the phrase going stag or stag party. So no, the male isn't around. Are you suggesting that I took the place, that I became the surrogate father?
Well, no, I was just wondering if you see it occasionally. I mean, I know generally that they don't. The males are promiscuous and they are doing their thing. Again, from an evolutionary perspective, we're taught, how they behave. But does a new mother ever rely on the male mate to help?
I've never observed it.
Yeah.
I have observed every year that at a certain point when the fawns are maybe 2 months old, a male will come and visit, and the fawn seems to recognize that this is his or her father, and they will nuzzle and groom each other a little bit, but then the males are gone. It's almost as though they come to make sure that everything's all right, and they go again.
One thing that also struck me, and again, not to provide, this is not a spoiler alert, but every day that you were feeding Penelope, defending Penelope, protecting Penelope, she would go off at night, and she was not in the house with you, right? You were in her zone. You were in that middle zone, your backyard in the wild. And then she would go off and you wouldn't know what was going to happen to her, with vehicles around and coyotes around and her mother around. I mean, this caused you a lot of anguish. And, you get into a relationship, out of feeling, but you kind of know at some level at times, like, this is not going to end well. I mean, were you nervous about this all the time?
Well, I was very conscious of needing her to live her free and wild life, that she was a wild animal. I did not want her to become domesticated at all. And so the circumstance here is quite wonderful. My property is open, and across the road, there are woods and a stream and a pond. It's a protected watershed area. There's a lake the other side that is surrounded by woods. And so she was able to live in her wild environment and come to me as she wished and leave as she wished. And that was ideal. I didn't want it any different than that. But yes, every time she left and she was out of my field of vision, I had anxiety. She was vulnerable because of her broken leg, but all the deer are vulnerable. And yes, there are coyotes. The road outside has claimed many deer. And yeah, so I was always anxious for her.
Wayne, I want to pivot to you for a little bit, because as I listen to Paul's story here, I'm very jealous of it. And I would like to have, in an ideal situation, an experience like that. But I know that humans seeking those kinds of relationships, as special as they can be, aren't always great for the animal or the human. What are the ethics of contemplating or executing on this kind of human-animal dynamic?
Well, that's a very big question, Joseph, and a very good question. I mean, the book tells us not to feed wildlife, right? I mean, that's kind of a very basic sort of precept of kind of conventional wildlife management. We talk about it too, in certain ways that, say bears, like, you don't want to be feeding bears because it gets them in trouble, right? That they then get accustomed to human food sources and then they interact with people, and it almost always turns out badly for the bears. Having said that, countless millions of people feed birds, right? I mean, this is an immense human enterprise, right? It happens at the Pacelle household in the Pacelle backyard every day. So I think that, Paul is kind of stretching us with his book in this regard. And clearly, his action was an act of mercy that morphed into something, more emotionally profound than that. But animals die in nature, right? And when an animal does die in nature, it creates space for another life. So we're not always able to see what's going on there. And, I certainly am not advocating that people, walk around with a bag of apples, or warm chestnut soup like Paul developed for Penelope as a general matter. I think, for me, it's about being alert to what's going on, right? If, there was an injured deer, right? A very bad leg, front leg for Penelope. And the fleetness of deer is the key to survival for them, right? That is just as basic as it gets for them. So I'm not, I think Paul scrambles some of the conventional thinking about that. And I'm not sure that I would say we should all be Paul in this regard. But his response was authentic. It was right. I mean, it was fabulously right what he did. And I think we've just got to figure it out. But I think the first step in all of this is being alert to the consciousness and prerogatives and volition of the animals. And, we recognize it with our companion animals, right? I mean, we grieve for them when we lose them, right? Their lifespans don't match ours. And, they're in our homes, they're our space, they're our family. I mean, there's plenty of popular writing that in many ways, the grief that we feel for the loss of a dog or a cat as a companion may be more profound than the grief we have for family members. I mean, it's just the truth. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. It's just the truth. And there are explanations for that. So I think we've got to be careful about how we handle wild animals. But clearly this notion that we're just going to let things be in a world where we have altered so many things so profoundly is wrong. And it's one reason why my wife and I, really are very supportive of wildlife rehab centers. We have to have a network, a safety net for all of these animals out there who are in trouble, often because of our handiwork. And we don't have that same system in terms of it being a comprehensive system like we do have for dogs and cats. So I think Paul's book raises a lot of questions. I really want to recommend that everybody pick it up, order it, and grapple with it. And also just understand his major lesson is that we humans are compassionate beings. We've got humanity. And it's a wonderful expression of humanity to care for other creatures. And it's especially wonderful when somebody's in trouble. I mean, you're the hero if you're a fireman who, gets up in a tree and rescues the cat. You're a hero if there's a dog, caught in the middle of a lake with a little hole in the ice and she's drowning and you throw a rope and the dog, grabs it in its teeth and pulls himself or herself out, or you go and pull the animal out. I mean, I think what Paul did is heroic, and it's right. I mean, this is an opportunity for all of us to be heroes when it comes to animals, because there are so many opportunities for heroism because animals are in such distress. But, they're not rules when it comes to that. And it's a challenging question.
Paul, we're about out of time. Let me come to you for final thoughts. What would you have our listeners know about your book and your story that we've not talked about so far?
I feel that it's simple, that life gave me a gift that was completely unanticipated, that I never could have sought or pursued, that has enriched me greatly. I feel that I'm a better human being for having shared this love with Penelope. I've learned from her. And I think that when we're given a gift, it's our commitment to give it to others.
When we express our humanity, it doesn't take the same form all the time, right? We're called to do different things. And I would just say, to all of our listeners and all people thinking about a relationship to animals, be a hero in your own way. Don't be a bystander. Do something. There's a whole set of problems out there that require a compassionate response. So I'm tremendously grateful to Paul and to Congressman Mrazek at Compass Rose Publishing. This is a really worthy endeavor. And as I said, every movement needs its authors and its artists. And we're lucky to have Paul with his great contribution.
All right, Paul Bochner, Penelope, The World of Each Other. We're recording this the day before Thanksgiving. Cyber Monday is just around the corner. If you have animal lovers on your list, I personally recommend this book for your holiday shopping consideration. It's a story that challenges us to look at wildlife not as a nuisance or as an ornament, but looking at those animals as neighbors, individuals with memories, emotional lives, vulnerabilities.
Thank you for listening to the Animal Wellness Podcast. Please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and follow Animal Wellness Action on Facebook, X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. To stay current with all of our news and information and to take action to help animals, sign up at animalwellnessaction.org. Until next time, remember, helping animals helps us all.